Right, well, thank you very much for the introduction. It's really nice to be here at Serverless Days Belfast in Banbridge. So we Googled all the good, interesting things we could talk about Banbridge here in our talk. So
move on.
No, we'll just get stuck in, right? Okay. So play the game of clouds, you transform or die. And as we mentioned, Conall and I are going to talk a little bit about the transformation that CME Group is going through today. But I need to tell you a little bit about CME Group first to set the scene, because CME is sometimes the largest exchange that everybody's never heard of. Okay? So we are the largest derivatives exchange in the world. And we provide a marketplace for our customers to come and trade with each other to manage the risks that they have in their business. So it might be a large manufacturer who wants to buy the raw materials that they're going to need for some big order, and they want to protect themselves against the price of those materials changing. Maybe it'll be a farmer who wants to sell their crops, but they want to protect themselves against maybe bad weather over the summer. It might impact the cost that they can sell them later in the year. Or it might be a financial services company that might want to trade some of the interest rate products or some crypto to again protect themselves against fluctuations in those rates. But there are thousands of products that you can trade at CME, and not just those. And every day we see around an average of 23 million trades on our platform. Now all the orders and the messages that come together to make those 23 million trades equates to about 15 billion individual units of work in our trading engines. And to support those engines and all the other features and functionalities you need for a financial exchange and a financial marketplace, CME has around 400 applications. So some of those are ultra-low latency, where our performance is measured in nanoseconds. And we have apps for risk management, we have apps for regulatory, we have apps for clearing, we have apps for data services. And anything you can kind of think of that you need for a financial market, we have an app for that. Okay? So just over a year ago, CME signed a partnership for 10 years with Google to move our entire exchange into the cloud. That's all 400 apps. Everything that's needed to support and run those apps will move to Google Cloud. So that's a pretty unique thing for financial services of our company of our size to do. Okay, what you tend to find with a large financial enterprise is they'll see some customers in the cloud and they'll say, well, what's maybe pretty low risk? Maybe save us some money and maybe give us a bit of a competitive edge that we can package up and we can put in the cloud. But we're taking a different approach and we're moving our entire company into the cloud. And we're going to build a financial marketplace in the cloud. And that's never been done before, and the technology to do that doesn't actually exist today. So we're going to spend the next sort of 8 or 9 years continuing to work with Google to build those technologies, build those services, the networking, the hardware, everything that we might need to make that available in the cloud. Now, Conall and I aren't actually going to migrate all 400 of those apps ourselves. Our area of expertise is the market data business. So we're not ultra-low latency sensitive, but we do stream real-time market data to our customers, and that's about 3 billion messages a day. And then we take that and we delay that and we stream it again to customers who don't really care about getting it real time. And we have batch jobs that crunch all this data and provide insights into that data to our customers. So our customers take that streaming data and the insights and they use that to understand what's going on in the markets. And they use it to make decisions on how to manage the risk in their companies. And we started our journey in the cloud back in 2015 with AWS. And today we own and support, manage and run and enhance our data lake and our data services in AWS. And these are some of the, if I get out of the way, these are some of the services and things that we use in our architectures today and continue to use as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about our transformation into Google Cloud and how we're working serverless into that transformation. So let's get started.
So from here on in, you might, if you've not seen Game of Thrones, you might be bamboozled by some of the memes. So if you leave this talk with a need to go and watch the show, you're welcome. Time well spent. These 5 rules we very much put together from our experiences over the last 7 years, using mainly AWS and now GCP over the last year and a half. You might find that if you're in a smaller business or a smaller enterprise that maybe some of this just doesn't apply to you, but certainly this is our experience working in a large enterprise. You'll see with each of the different rules we have kind of woven in what are the fantasies behind some of these. So they're kind of a Mythbuster style, and I'll tell you this up front, just in case anybody doesn't pick it up. The main theme or the main message is, behind a lot of these here is serverless as a technology is great, but to make scale and impact and be successful with them for your business, you have to weave it into the business strategy and bring the business along with you. At least that's in our experience. So let's get into the first one. Don't treat the cloud platform like a vendor. And for the eagle-eyed amongst you, you'll notice I didn't label the AWS icons. I just assumed everybody here would probably know what they are. But I've done that for the GCP icons over here. You're welcome once again. This particular rule is very much driven from our first experiences in AWS, where the main work that we were doing and project work at that time was moving large workloads on-premise infrastructure and moving that into the cloud. So very lift and shift, very IT-driven, saving some pennies and some pounds on cost optimization on how we use the infrastructure, but it wasn't changing the business. The measure of success for those projects was, don't change the business, don't impact the business, right? Now, while we did some nice serverless stuff in there, and that was all good, we had ambitions to try to do more. So now that we're in a partnership with Google, one thing that we find that's definitely accelerated the drive across the entire organization to change. And that decision for that partnership came from the business. It wasn't driven by the IT teams or by the IT leadership. It was a business decision by the CEO to transform how we innovate and how we scale and how we grow for the next for the future. And now that you have a partner, we have a direct line to the product teams and people who can influence product teams to influence the roadmap. So if we have specific use cases for and they don't have, and the platform does not have a service that facilitates that, you can pick up the phone and say, hey bud, do you mind building a new service for us, because we're not going to be able to move our business on your platform until you have that. On the flip side, if you're treating the cloud more like a vendor, you're probably not going to have that opportunity, or you'll certainly have a much longer runway before you get that kind of a service out there, depending on commercials and how many other customers need this. And similarly, if you have an existing service that perhaps the vendor but the platform has that doesn't have all the feature functionality that you have, that's another opportunity to pick up that direct line and go, you mind maybe putting some new features in there, because we're not going to be able to move all of our apps onto that. So one example for that for us internally, we use ordering is very important to the products that we build, and for our customers, message ordering, it helps us deliver low latency streams of data. So we already seen an example where PubSub, which is a very popular Google service for distributing your data globally, we would like to use that much more heavily internally. We use already things like Kafka, but now we've seen GCP starting to introduce ordering functionality on the PubSub, so that more of our apps can move on to it, and we're looking forward to scaling that even further for more parts of the business. So that's an example where you can really quickly get a turnaround on influencing the roadmap for the particular partner you're working with, whether it's GCP or whatever cloud provider it happens to be. From a technical perspective, what we've also seen is having that partner really helps with a very low friction experience on upskilling and onboarding your engineering teams to use serverless services like the BigQueries, the PubSubs, the Dataflows, which is some that we are now beginning to use. We've been very surprised and pleasantly surprised and impressed with how easy it's been to get onto a very mature infrastructure like that, but also to get these application teams up and running very quickly and starting to launch features up towards production for our customers and for our business. And that's something that is probably new for us. The last bullet point there, again, which speaks to the difference between a partner and a vendor. Whenever we were working with on our AWS solutions, we had to make those work within the confines of the existing enterprise ecosystem and technology set that existed for all of our other on-premise applications. So how we build, how we deploy, how we patch, how we monitor, how we operate our applications, the AWS solutions had to work with all of that kind of legacy practices and legacy tech. But now that we're 100% in on GCP, well, all of a sudden, some of those barriers have broken down, and we can start to challenge some of those existing processes, and we can go for more fully cloud native, which we weren't really necessarily able to achieve before, and that help us deliver more value to the business. So again, having that partnership with a platform, really key to enabling that change and driving and accelerating that change in the business. Roger, hit us with some knowledge.
Okay. So we've now got our partner on Google, which is great. How are we going to run our transformation? Okay, rule number 2, put the business in the driving seat. Okay, and a little bit of fancy here is we're going to cloud, and we're going to go to serverless as well. That's a technology project, right? But we're moving our whole business into the cloud, and ultimately it's the business that needs to be successful, and the business that needs to be successful by delivering value to customers. So what we're doing at CME is we're moving away from our old project and project delivery model and moving to a product operating model. So in our old style, the business would come and say, here's a feature I want for my customers, and the technology teams would all get together and come up with an architecture and maybe order some hardware and do some networking and see what all the things are we need to do to deliver that feature, execute that project, roll on to the next one and do the same again. And you might have a business sponsor who stays nice and close to that, or you might have somebody who just kind of waits to the end. But either way, it's pretty much technology who's making all those decisions and deciding on architectures. And sometimes what makes sense for technology doesn't always make sense for your business. And can lead to friction down the line when the business is trying to accelerate delivery and you've got these architectures in place that maybe don't help with that. So when we get the product model, you take your business and you make them responsible for successful delivery of the product. You put into their hands the ability to take ownership for delivery of their product. The technology teams become an integral part of that product team, and not just a service that they reach out to. Ownership of the architectural decisions gets put into the product team, and it gets put into the hand of the people that understand the business and understand their customer needs. So you can start having conversations with the business around how does serverless fit into our architecture, how can we use this to improve our product and take this forward. So one of the big things that we've seen going, product model and going to the cloud, the cost of your product becomes much more visible. So in our old way of the projects, we had project budgets and maintenance budgets and infrastructure budgets and support budgets, and we had all these budgets that kind of just served to obfuscate the actual true cost of running your product. When you get to cloud and serverless, that becomes much more visible. And we've had more than a few tiers from our business when they look at the actual cost it takes to run their product, and it's much more expensive than they thought it was in the first place. But those costs were always there, but they were generally hidden off and shared budgets across 400 applications. It's kind of hard to work out what that looks like. And what the business want in the end is they want value, they want velocity, and they want scale. And you've heard lots of stuff about serverless today, and that fits really well with those things. So having your product team and your technology and your business together in that team, you're much more able to have the conversations around how does serverless impact it, how can we add this to our business strategy, and how can we use serverless to take forward our product for our customers. Now we have a really good product owner, and he came to us at the end of last year and he said, been talking to Google and they have this really nice service called Analytics Hub. It's still in beta, but I think it would be a great offering to add to our customers. So can we see what we can do? So we took that into the product team and we looked at the service and what we need to do to enable it, what we need to do to build data sets or listings on it, how to test it, roll it through environments, get it deployed. And that took us about 4 to 5 weeks end to end to do. And now it takes us maybe 2 weeks to add a new data set onto that. And Analytics Hub is part of BigQuery. It's all serverless, and it actually has its own front-end portal as well, where customers can come and search for data offerings that CME have. So we don't even have to worry about that. So now the customer has a nice, easy way to quickly get new data sets in front of their customers, and good feedback on what's successful, what do the customers want, and what do they not like. So they can now make these very quick decisions on directions that they want to take their business in. So having those teams together, and having the business come to an understanding of how serverless can help, and you having those conversations, super important, and why you need to keep the business in charge of your transformation. Okay?
Excellent, Mr. Bond. So, this is one of my favorite slides. So, if only I had a gold Game of Thrones gold crown for every time I hear an engineer or developer in the past say, I don't really care what the product does, just tell me how you want me to build it, right? Give me the tools, give me the toys, which is not necessarily a mindset that's going to help you whenever you're trying to scale a serverless architecture, because you really need to understand the business, and you need to know your customer, and you need to understand your use cases in order to help, use serverless to help you make the change that you want to make and drive product in your product team. So one thing that we've been doing probably for the last few months, since the tail end of last year, was really doubling down on the amount of time that we spend with the teams on our domain-driven design. So here's a variety of different techniques that you can use: value stream mapping or orderly mapping, impact mapping, example mapping, event storming. You don't have to use all of them, but you can use one or a combination of them. But the entire point of them, and the kind of the common practice with them is they are collaborative. They get the product team to understand and map the landscape and bring that alignment between your product roadmap and the technical roadmap. You merge those both of those things to become the roadmap. We've kind of ran these. Oh, and I also highly recommend that you put a map of Westeros up while you're doing this, because it just makes it much more fun and understand how to build the customer value stream from top to bottom. Well, one thing, when we did this, we did it in 2 iterations to begin with, just to try it out. The first time we did it was just with the engineering team, as minus the product owners. And the second time was with the product owners, the product manager, the product team, the engineering team, all in one room. And the difference between both of those sessions was night and day. The very first time we did it, the engineers all thought they had a pretty good idea of who our customers were, right? There are these 2 or 3 customers, these 4 or 5 features that are really key to them, and some customers value one over the other, but by and large, that's it. Pretty strong idea, well, at least they felt a strong idea of what that was. Cue the second session, about 1 to 2 weeks later, with the product manager and product owners in the room as well, and jaws hit the ground, eyes popped out of sockets, light bulb moments, some come to Jesus moments, whenever the product manager says, no, guys, it's more like 7 to 8 customers, and it's not 3 to 4 features, it's more like 10 to 15, and some of those don't even exist yet. We haven't built them yet, right? But a real eye-opener for the team, and also learning experience for those from the business or the product side to understand how we can bring some of the technical services along to do something which looks really complex from a product perspective, but actually could be quite straightforward if we use some serverless services in there, right? So, I mean, in that conversation, you don't need to say we're going serverless or serverless architecture or serverless, that and the other. The word serverless didn't even come up. It's like, what's going to make us go fast, right? It's not about, so it really brought that alignment quite easily to make it a natural conversation to bring in to that session. Well, here's the products, here's the features, now that we understand them and we're on that same language, here's how we can bring some technology along to enable that, to bring that to production, or to bring that product to market. At the same time, serverless is not always right for everything, and you also can't go for 100% serverless from day one, so you do need to plan an evolutionary architecture and an iterative approach to getting to where you want to be, building stepping stones, right? And also being able to, being prepared to say, maybe serverless isn't the right answer. So for example, in some of our low latency domains, serverless wouldn't work for us. It's not going to be quick enough. And there'll be other use cases where you might think serverless would be a great option because it looks nice, but maybe it could actually be more expensive than the previous service was worked and did the same thing. So you just need to be prepared to say maybe not, while you're building that roadmap. So that's just kind of a word of advice.
Okay, well, we're doing pretty well. Right, we've got a partner. We've transformed how we're going to work. Conall has us skipping hand in hand in the King's Landing there with our roadmaps nicely aligned. How are we going to execute on our roadmaps? Okay, well, we're going to design for flow. So you've heard lots of really good stuff about serverless here today, and it's pretty easy to say, well, let's just go serverless. Everything's going to be better. It's going to be awesome. But how do you actually know that? Right? And how are you going to actually prove that? So you're going to build and you're going to measure for flow. And flow are all the great agile engineering practices that allow you to deliver software to your customers. So your CI/CD pipelines, your test approach, your release approach, your pair and mod programming, your elimination of waste, your elimination of handovers, all these good things that you can kind of bring together to create your flow. But having your flow there isn't enough. You need to be able to make decisions on changes that you're making or serverless services that you're using that are impacting your flow and improving it or making it worse. So you need to measure that. Okay, and what we're doing in our teams, and you've heard a little bit about this earlier, is we're using the DOOR framework. It has pretty simple measurements that pretty much anybody here can probably do for the applications that I work on, which is lead time for change, frequency of deployments, time to restore, and percentage change fail. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward, nice way to measure, and pretty easy for everybody to do. And when you get these measurements, you maybe want to visualize them, make them a little bit easier to understand. So usually things like control charts, your velocity charts, production incident reports, and you bring these all together and you review these together as a team. Okay, with the business there, this is a product team, so you review them all together because it's really important for your product team to understand what your flow is and understand when they're making changes and when they're implementing serverless services, what the impacts are. So, throw a little bit of a bone out here to the AWS guys. You're still listening? We did measure our flow in AWS and how long it took us to get a new data set in front of our customers. So it took us, that was build a new Flink app, put it into our EMR clusters, maybe add nodes to the clusters, rebalance them, maybe look at the memory management of the clusters. There's all these bits and pieces that we had to do to get a new data set just in front of the customers. And it took us about 4 weeks end to end to make all that happen. So then we took a look at AWS Glue. AWS Glue is serverless service, and it actually has quite a similar architecture that we built ourselves, but it's all managed for us. So we don't have to worry about that. So when we took a look at that, all we had to do was actually write the code that was going to create the data set. Then we could use Glue to run jobs, to promote their environments, and to get this data set in front of our customers. And we were able to show that we could do that in a week. Okay? So what business owner doesn't want to see that what used to take us 4 weeks now only takes us a week? But the main thing here is we were able to prove that, and we were able to show it in our measurements. Okay? So that becomes a really powerful tool for you to drive the serverless conversation into your team and into your product. No, we didn't take that any further in AWS because we weren't product model, and then we signed a deal with Google. But we're taking those lessons with us into our transformation, and as we use services like Dataflow and BigQuery and Analytics Hub in Google, we're measuring our flow, and we're demonstrating with empirical evidence how that is improving our flow. So our businesses are really enjoying seeing the improvements that we're able to make for the product and take their business forward to be a bit more successful. Okay.
Outstanding.
Final rule, nearly there.
Last rule, also my favorite slide. And this one I put up because I feel it's not enough talked about in serverless circles or even in the blogs or any of the talks that I've seen. And that is that, and Julian from AWS today referenced something slightly related. Lambda's done a really, really great job, or Cloud Functions or Function as a Service, on lowering the barrier of entry for engineering teams to start to get into serverless technology. And they really does a very great job of reducing the cognitive load that teams need to take on as far as understanding infrastructure as code. But in our experience, when you start to look at other serverless services, and there's plenty more of them now, all of them have slightly different nuances on the cognitive load and the expertise required to use to build the infrastructure with some of those, or to deploy them with infrastructure. So, for example, Bigtable within GCP would be an example of you need to understand partitioning and your sharding and where your hot servers are. Are they auto-scaling appropriately? You need to understand your reservation limits. And between each of the different services, there's something else slightly different from the other one before. So it's not just all Lambdas all over the place that makes something serverless. There's other services involved. And we find over the years that you need to be able to scale your team, or to be able to skill your team appropriately to be able to handle that. So that's using good team topology, whether you're bringing in an expert like a SRE to help you, or whether it's democratizing the skill set amongst the team and helping them skill up. You need to try and change the responsibilities of what the engineers are accustomed to. Most of them are accustomed to developing application code, so bringing in an IC, a little or a lot, is usually a big lift. And we've certainly seen over the years, we've lost engineers that were maintaining a cloud stack, some of which was serverless, some of which wasn't, because they got burnt out with maintaining a lot of the infrastructure as code, right? So it's something that I think is maybe not mentioned enough in cloud, and certainly we've seen that over the years. So have a think about that. It's not, and also a bit of a myth. I think Lambda does a great job at making serverless sound easy, that everybody thinks that that's what it is. That's what serverless is, and there's a bit more to it than that. That's me.
Okay, brilliant. So if we just pop back to our 5 rules where we started. We're only a year into our transformation, okay? So we're still learning, we're still maturing into this, but we're trying to keep these rules in mind, because we do think that these are going to be the rules that help us be as successful as we possibly can. So hopefully you heard something today that maybe resonates with some of the stuff that you're doing in your own businesses, and it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much.